Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about an increasingly important topic, and that is kids and anxiety. I wish this wasn't so, but I really think there is more as anxiety increases in our culture, in our country, in our nation, in the world. It increases all around, not just in adults. And so, unfortunately, one of the natural side effects of this is that it's increasing in our children. And I have several thoughts for you guys today on what to do if you have a child that is maybe complaining of having anxiety, or if you just notice those attributes or behaviors in them. I have a lot of tips for you guys on what you can do to work through that, and also what to do about the topic in general of anxiety and kids. Is that something we should be talking to them about? Is it not? What do we do? So stick with me and I will share all my thoughts with you. So the first thing I want to talk about is, where do kids get the idea that they have anxiety? Obviously, I know you could be watching this because you're noticing some signs of anxiety in your child. Maybe they're not coming to you and reporting, "Mom, I think I have anxiety." But there are some that are saying that, and I want to point that out first and foremost. Where is a child learning this? Where are they getting this? Where are they hearing it? I think it's obvious that the older their ages are, the more they could be hearing terms of anxiety or things like that. But nonetheless, I think one of the hard things here is that as it has increased in general, and by that I mean there's some studies and reports out there that have shared that anxiety has drastically increased, especially in the United States, right, in the past 10-ish years as compared to before. So there is that rise, which means there's also a rise in talking about it. There's a rise in commercials about it. There's a rise in freely speaking about it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. In a lot of ways, that's a good thing. But one of the negative side effects is that kids are learning that language, and they're learning in a way it can teach them that this is what anxiety is, but it doesn't really fully teach them what anxiety is. It just makes them aware of the term, and then they might be using that term incorrectly, or they might be saying, "Oh, I have anxiety because their friend said that they did," or they overheard their friend's mom talking about it, or something like that. And then they are identifying, "I'm upset about something, I'm worried about something, so I have anxiety." And the problem is that that's probably misrepresented for them sometimes. But as a parent, you don't want to minimize that, right? You don't want to dismiss that if they truly are struggling with something like that. But it's a complex thing, which is why I wanted to do a video on this to try to help you. The first thing to take into consideration is that they are hearing about anxiety so much more than even when you were a kid, right? Or I was a kid. It's just talked about more. And as I already mentioned, that's not a bad thing, but it's giving them an idea that maybe they have anxiety when maybe they really don't. So that could be one conversation to have with your kid, first of all. What do you think anxiety is? What does anxiety feel like to you? What do you feel like when you're experiencing anxiety? What does your body do? What happens to your mind, your body, all that stuff when you're feeling like you have anxiety? What situations are you in when you think you have anxiety? So if you start asking more of those questions, you're going to get the information you really need to be able to determine, does my child really struggle with some true anxiety, or are they kind of mirroring things that they have heard or seen somewhere else? Are they hearing it from a friend and kind of identifying it with themselves to have that commonality with their friend, or are they really struggling with it, right? I think you want to ask those questions, those unleading questions, those open-ended questions to them, so that they can really be able to identify and explain to you, "This is what I'm experiencing, Mom. This is what anxiety feels like to me," or "Dad," right? "This is what goes on for me." So ask them those questions to help you get more of an idea of what are we working with here. Kids, even the older they get a little bit more stubborn, but they want to talk, usually. I know there's some kids that are maybe a little bit more tight-lipped or a little bit harder. I've definitely had some of those kids come through my practice, but I almost always get to a point where they want to talk, right? And I'm not saying I have a magic wand. Sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know what's going on with this kid because I can't get them to talk. And maybe that's your kid. But it might take some time, it might take the right questions, it might take a couple things, but by and large, they want to talk about it. So, get those questions flowing with them so that they can be able to express what's going on for them and not just you guessing for them or you speaking for them, something like that. Another thing that I think is really helpful is as you're trying to get these conversations going and ask them these questions, one that you can ask is, what was really good about your day and what was not so good, right? And again, with clients, I just kind of, especially kids, because you can be a little bit more playful with them about it. But I tell them in my office that I don't know is not an answer. And I even do that with my kids as well. I don't know is not an answer. You have an answer. You have a reason for why we do things. All of us do. Deep down, we have a reason. So I don't let that answer fly of I don't know. So ask them what was good about your day, what was not so good, and they most likely will try to say I don't know, or maybe if they're younger they will tell you. But that's a good question to ask when we're talking about this anxiety in children, because how they answer that question of what was not so good and even what was good can really lead you to, okay, is it really anxiety that they're struggling with, or is it a friendship that they're struggling with? Is it maybe an insecurity that they're struggling with? And maybe it's a worry about homework in particular, or classes, or whatever. So being able to narrow it down a little bit more will help a ton in knowing, okay, maybe we are dealing with some anxiety, but it's about testing, or it's about a friendship, or it's about an insecurity, and it's not just this overwhelming blanketed anxiety. And so ask them, what was good about your day? What was not so good? And most of the time they will tell you. Another huge thing that if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I preach this all the time, but it's just so true and so powerful, I can't help it. This is true for adults with anxiety, so it's absolutely true for children who might be struggling with anxiety. We have to make sure as their parent that we are helping get them good sleep and good food. Like I said, it's true for adults as well, but our bodies just don't function well if we do not have good sleep and if we're not fueling it well, right? We don't put diesel fuel in a gasoline car because it's the wrong fuel and it's not good for it. It'll cause problems, it'll cause breakdowns. So it's the same thing with our bodies. If we're not putting good things in, we are completely working against the systems. We're working against the way our body was made to be, and we're working against being helpful to struggles that we might have, right? Physically and mentally as well. This is a little bit of a side note, but serotonin, which is one of our huge feel-good hormones, is 95% of it is in our gut. And I don't think a lot of people know that. I didn't know that until I was an adult, that 95% of it is in our gut. And so our gut bacteria and the food we eat and the way that we take care of our body has a tremendous impact on our mental and emotional state. So if you have a kid that is dealing with some anxiety, or they might be, or whatever, and they don't sleep well, they're going to bed super late, they don't have a good routine, and they're also eating a bunch of food that's not really good for them, that's not really fueling them and taking good care of them, then the anxiety might be a very common and obvious result, right? I don't say that to be judgy or critical at all. It's just to give you information of, again, for adults and kids, what we do to our bodies has a tremendous impact on our mental and emotional health. So if your kiddo is struggling, I would say, no matter, it might take a couple weeks, especially if you guys do have maybe like a rough routine or not great habits in place. It might take a little time, but it might be well worth it to adjust, making sure they get good sleep and that they get good, healthy foods. And I won't go into that part because there are a million resources out there on what good sleep and good food would look like. So dig into that if you need to, but I think that has more power to it than you might realize. Another one that I would say is, this is from my own experience with my kids. I have a different video that maybe I'll link at the end for you guys that is about kids and screen time, and just my own experience with my 4 kids. My littlest is a baby, so she doesn't watch the TV, but that's part of what I have in there, is that too much screen time is just not, it's not good for adults either, but it's not good for kids because it's severely overstimulating to them. And the way things are made now is a lot different than they used to be, and everything is a lot more fast-paced and high stimulation with color, noise, movement, all of that stuff. There's research and studies on it. You can watch that other video. But I think that can create a sense of anxiety almost in kids, because then once they are slow and calm and not at a rapid pace, it's unsettling because it's unfamiliar, right? It's not their normal state or their normal homeostasis to just be calm. So anxiety sets in because it feels a little bit foreign. So I'm not saying TV causes anxiety. What I am saying is it's a thing that should be kept in balance. And what I notice with my own kids is the more time that they, because I'm pretty picky about what I let them watch, but the more time that they are in front of it, even if it's an approved show by me, they just get crabby and irritable and all sorts of things. And so I really try to limit that time as well, because it's not good on their mood in general. So that's a small thing too that maybe is creating or adding to this anxious feeling that your child has, that you might not realize it. And in a way it seems the opposite, right? Like being able to sit down and decompress would help, but especially with kids shows, it's the opposite. A couple more tips I have for you before we wrap up today. One of them is a more clinical approach for you. So obviously you remain your child's parent and not their therapist, but you can absolutely use these tools. That's why we are here. That's why we exist, is to give you some of these tools to take home and use. And one of them that we do with kids in therapy or counseling, whatnot, is externalizing their problem. So narrative therapy is a very common one used with children, and it's kind of designed to be used with children, can be with adults as well, but it's very fitting for kids. And within narrative therapy, we use externalizing the problem. So if a kid comes in and they're scared of a monster under their bed, the therapist would work through it with them to help them learn that this monster that they're imagining, right, is external. It's separate from them. When they are thinking of it, it's in their mind as a very real thing. And that thought is internal. That thought is a part of them. And so they have to work to externalize this thought or this idea or this fear of the monster. So the way to do that is to help them name what it is that's bothering them. So maybe they can name that monster like something silly, but even giving it a name is a way to externalize it. It's a way to help them know that this thought, this fear, this monster does not have control over them or their mind or whatnot. So if they wake up in the middle of the night and they have this fear of the monster come up, if they have a name for it, they're able to say, like, hey, boogeyman, get out of here. I don't know. I can't think of a good name, but they have more of a sense over it, and then they also have the words and the verbiage to be in charge. They have that tool to be able to say, this is not a part of me, this is not something that's drowning me or overwhelming me, it's something that I get to name and say, get out, go away, whatever it is, right? So when I am saying this, because with anxiety, I think it's so important to help them name it, but not necessarily name it anxiety. Now, caveat right here, this is just my 2 cents. There might be plenty of other therapists and counselors out there that tell you, call it anxiety, don't have any confusion around what it is, call it what it is, and that's fine. My 2 cents is I would not call it anxiety if it was my child, especially a younger child dealing with it. I wouldn't call it that because, like I said at the very beginning of this video, there's so much more out there about anxiety. There's so much more that they hear, commercials they see, people talking about it, and it doesn't have a great sound about it, and kids also don't fully understand what it is. So if they are to think they have anxiety, most likely they probably think it's a very serious thing, right? And so I wouldn't call it anxiety. I would help them name it. I would help them externalize it and say, when you feel that way, because we already discussed you're going to walk through them and ask them how they're feeling. When do they feel like this? What does it feel like? All those things. when you identify that and you say to them, okay, when you feel like this, what are we going to call it? Let's give it a name, right? And that name, in my 2 cents, in my opinion, is not going to be anxiety. Let them come up with some name that they want to call it so that they know when I feel like this, I can have control over it. I can tell it to go away. I can put a lid on it. I can do these things because you're teaching them an important, powerful skill at a young age to let them know they do have control over their mind and emotions. They do have power over their thoughts, which is true. It's just hard to do that sometimes, especially if you've never been taught that and you never practice that and then you become an adult. It's really hard to have control over your thoughts and emotions, but we do. So you're giving your child a gift by helping them name it, whatever name is fitting for them, and helping them know when that bubbles up, when that comes up, you talk to that thing, even if it's in your own mind, or if you need to go, you could tell them if you need to go to the bathroom or something and just talk to it for a minute and say, go away, leave me alone, don't bother me, right? Something like that. Again, this depends on their age, but it's helping them know they have control over it. And that is a very powerful thing. That's why we use that trick in therapy, to help them know they are in control. And if your child is struggling with anxiety, if you notice some of these things, they need to know they're in control of it, because I see this in adults as well, that the anxiety gets to a point where it just feels all consuming and it feels like you can't control it. Lastly, I would say, just again, like with adults, teach your child to be aware of how their body feels. I mentioned that a couple times, but work it out with them to know that when they are super tense, they can't really take a deep breath and their body can't calm down. I've done this with multiple kids who have worked through anxiety with me in my office, and I make them do that. I'm like, let's sit here together and just get all scrunched up and hold it, and then I want you to take a deep breath, but like don't unfold, right? And it's so funny because nobody can do it, right? You can pretend, right? You can just like hold it tight and be like, but that's not a genuine deep breath. And so I would do this with all of my kid clients, and I explain it to adults. I don't make them practice it out, but kids have more fun with it. So teach them that they're holding that anxiety inside. And that's true for us, right? We hold our anxiety somewhere. We hold it in our chest. We hold it in our neck. We hold it in our shoulders. We hold it in our head. We hold it in our heart. We hold it somewhere. And when we can truly take a full deep breath where you feel your shoulders sink down and you feel your chest go down and you feel it through your body, it's a powerful experience, and it really teaches you that you took that deep breath, right? Your anxiety didn't prevent you from it because you took it, right? It goes right back to what I said a second ago about having that control. So teach them to be aware of how their body's feeling, and then give them the tool of how to slow their body down, which is maybe taking a deep breath in that moment. There's other little tricks for kids about like the 5 fingers. They like can grab each finger and go through the 5 senses to help them get a little more grounded. And if you look through online, there's lots of other tips that might be helpful for kids, and you might just kind of find the one that is fitting for your child. But as I mentioned I have a video on anxiety for adults. This is pretty similar too, of helping them calm their body down in the moment that they are feeling a lot of anxiety. And when they're not feeling it, helping them work through knowing that they can name it, externalize it, and have power over it. If your child is of age, I would also encourage you to let them write out what I said at the beginning about what was good about your day, what was bad about your day. Encourage them to write it out, and write out the good and write out the not so good, right? That's another way to externalize what's going on with them. And I just think of it like that, like constantly just getting it out of your body. And if you can help teach them that, you can help them get through this, and they don't have to be stuck with the really hard battle of feeling worrisome or feeling anxious or feeling unsure. That's not fun for anybody, and it's heartbreaking to see your child going through that, right? But I want you to know there's a lot you can do. And my last tip for you is, don't misunderstand me. I am a therapist, and I've worked with kids, and I love my job. And I know that parents who bring their kids to me have the best of intentions, right? But I want to encourage you this. If you are searching for a therapist or a counselor for your child, I would strongly encourage you, talk to your doctor, your spouse, your family, get all the things that you need. But one idea I would have first is spend an hour a week with them, for just them to have some one-on-one time with you and or your spouse, however it works out in your family and in your situation. But if you can find an hour a week for them to go to a therapist, that means you can find an hour a week to spend with them. And that might do some life-changing things for them without ever seeing a therapist. And I know that sounds backwards because I am a therapist, but I think that sometimes it feels overwhelming and it's hard, and sometimes you need the break too, and I know that. But sometimes what both really need is just some good uninterrupted time together. Some time that's one-on-one, not with cell phones, not with errands, not with agendas, but just some one-on-one time. If you can find that hour for the therapist, you can find that hour for each other. And I think that it could be so powerful. So I would say try that first. And if that's not helping and you still need some outside help, absolutely seek out for that. But I wanted to throw that out there as well, that sometimes the anxiety might just be some uncertainty in them, and having the parent come in and provide some security and safety and stability might be the biggest trick of all to help wash away that uncertainty. I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any thoughts or questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. Share it with a friend and or a sister or a brother or whoever that might be having a child struggle with anxiety, and know that there's a lot of things to do. There's a lot to work on, and these might just be a few tips, but hopefully there's a few in there that can be really powerful and helpful for you and your child. I appreciate all your support, and I'll see you at the next video.